In this video, we're going to look at how to use custom fonts in an Android project. Now, I just have a new Android project created that is for Android version 2.3.3, and I've opened up the main XML layout file, and that's all that's been done to it so far. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just start out with deleting this auto-generated text. And let's just put some, I'm just going to put large text on the screen here. And when we select our text property, there are some things that we can do with formatting the text. So we have text color and text size and the style. And there's also typeface. Now if you look, typeface, when we hover over it says normal, sans serif, monospace. This gives us the option of changing. So these are the font styles that are available in Android. Nothing really that exciting. Just some basic. What we have is sans already. Then we have a serif font. And then we have monospace. So that's about as exciting as their fonts get. But there are a lot more opportunities for you to design your apps with some more interesting font selections. So we're going to look at how to import in some fonts and then customize your text elements to use those fonts. So first thing you need to do is we're going to, in our assets folder, we're going to create a folder called fonts. So I'm just going to right click on the assets folder and choose new folder. And I'm going to name it fonts. And what we're going to do is find some fonts and pull it into this folder, and then programmatically we have to make the connection between the text and our font. So where do you get fonts? Well, you have fonts on your computer already that you can use. I'm also going to show you how to download a font from some of the web resources. And one of them that I like to use is FontSquirrel. Now FontSquirrel, it's www.fontsquirrel.com, and these have free fonts even for commercial use. So if you're making an app with it, you don't have to pay any royalty fees or buy the fonts. And these are also good for using fonts for web pages as well. You can use the @FontFace feature in CSS to import in custom fonts. But we're focusing on Android here. So this gives you some examples on their home page, and then you can also filter by different styles. So I'm going to go and I'm going to choose a grunge font, and they show you little samples. Now you can download the fonts and you can download the TrueType versions. Also want to note when it says offsite, when it's offsite, it's not on the FontSquirrel site, so it's going to take you out to another website in order to find and download those fonts. So for simplicity purposes, I'm going to choose a font from here that I don't have to go out to another page for. So I kind of like this grunge. This looks kind of interesting. Yeah, let's go with that. So first of all, I want to view it because I can test my sample text in here to see if that's really what I am aiming for. So we can go to test drive and then type in some text. We can change the size if you wanted to see what it looks like smaller. Which is good because if you're going to be building on different sized devices, different resolutions, then you can see what this will look like on a small screen versus what it's going to look like on a larger screen. So I like this font, so I'm going to choose to download it, so I could choose one of the buttons for download TrueType font. And it's going to download it and put it wherever your downloads go on your computer system. And here I have my folder that has the files that was downloaded and unzipped, and you can see that this is the name of the font, and it also has a license that goes with it. And you know, sometimes they ask for donations and things like that. In this case, it's just asking for a link to the image or some kind of a note, but that's not required as well either. So the TrueType font file, this TTF file, is what is going to be put into our Eclipse fonts folder. So I'm going to switch back to Eclipse, and here's my file with my TrueType font. And you know what, I'm going to rename this font just to make it a little easier for me to work with. So I'm just going to call it Grunge. And I'm going to drag it over and put it into my fonts folder and copy files. Now, even though we have the file into our assets folder, we can't go over here and then just pick a new font from it. It does not show up back into our typeface. So if I come back down here, you see that we still have those 4 same basic fonts. It hasn't added anything else in there. So in order to be able to use this font in our app, we have to tell our Android project about it and then connect it to this text view. So I'm going to open up the Java file and Custom Fonts Java, and we have our onCreate. So when our activity is being created, we also need to tell it we're going to initialize our typeface in here. So I'm going to do init typeface. We're creating a new method here, and you can see that it is showing me there's an error. It says init typeface is undefined for our custom fonts. So if I hover over here, we get a pop-up message that says there's one quick fix available, create method init typeface. So this is a shortcut for us. It'll save us a little typing, so I'm going to click that, and you can see that now down here it's created that method for us. And we also have a little comment here, auto-generated method stub. We don't need that, so we'll just take that out. Okay, so we'll say typeface, and let's give it a variable name. I'm just going to call it Grunge, because if we do more than one font, it would be helpful to be able to identify it. So I'm just going to say typeface grunge equals typeface, and we're going to create from asset, and then we're going to say get assets. It's going to go out to the assets folder, and then in our path, this next part, we're going to say this is where the font file is located and what it's called. So it's grunge.ttf. So we've initialized the typeface. We're calling it Grunge. We're saying get this from our assets, the get assets method, and the location of where the file is. So now from this point forward, Grunge is referring to the Grunge TrueType font in the fonts folder. Alright, continuing on. Let's see, we want to now take this typeface and attach it to the text that we have in here. So first of all, let's see, I'm going to create a string for this, and we're also going to give our text string here an ID. So let's say this was our title. So by assigning an ID in our program, we can come back and say find the ID with title and assign this typeface to it. I'm also going to assign a string to this. So instead of large text, we'll create a new string. We'll call it title string, or title text is better. And so we'll say, let's call this Android Fest. Just for something to give us a variation in letters and characters in the alphabet. Alright, so I'm going to click OK. And again, I'm going to click OK to assign that to that text string. And then we have Android Fest. We'll go back to our Java file, but now that this has an ID called title text, we can now connect our font to our title text. So I'm going to say what we're looking at is a text view, and we're going to call it title text, and that is equal to a text view. And now we have to tell it to find that ID. So find view by ID, our ID, and now it pops up and you can see we have our title. So this is showing us some errors here, and it says cannot be resolved to a type. Import the text view. So we have to import in the text view that's going to add it up here. Let me pop this up. So just like we imported other components, other code bundles, if you will, into our project, we also need to do that if we're referring to text view. So I'm going to choose import. So it imports the widget for text view. Title. There we go. Now I'm still getting some errors here, or not errors, warnings. It's saying that grunge isn't used, and it's also saying that title text isn't used, and that's because we're not finished yet. So we'll continue on here, and now that we've said, okay, let's go out and grab this text view, let's attach the font to that. So I'm going to say title text dot set typeface, and then the typeface name that I want to use in there, which is grunge. Okay, so now these two are connected to each other, and you'd be inclined to come back here to your main XML and look at it and say it's not showing up. It's unfortunately it does not show up in our graphical layout. In order to see the font, we have to either test it on your real device or in the emulator. So let me run the emulator. Okay, so here it is in my emulator, and you can see it's kind of small, so I'm going to go back here. Let's make this bigger. So I'm just going to select it, and in the properties down here, we're going to say our text size. Text size is, let's make it 60 SP. Let's just see what that looks like. So I'm going to save my changes and come back here and run it in the emulator. Okay, so you can see from here now, made it bigger so we can see the text a little better. Now the difference between this and this is this emulator is you know, the screen is a larger size and this is just a 3.7, so I could change this to be a larger tablet, which is what this is designed for. And then you can see how our custom font shows up. Let's try adding a button to our layout and then putting the typeface on the button. So I'm going to switch back to my main XML file and let me find a button. Let's put it in here and let's size it. First of all, give it a name. We'll call it sample BTN. We'll add a text string. So this is what we want to have written on our button text. And instead of the width, let's make this big. Whenever you come across deprecated, just ignore that. That's stuff that's old, that's going away, and you don't want to base any of your new apps on anything that's going to be discontinued in the future. Let's say text size. We'll make this bigger so that we can see it. There we go. So now we have our button. It's called Tap BTN. Oh, I'm sorry, that's the text string. It is, the ID is sample_BTN. So that's what we want to refer to in our Java file. So let's get a button. We'll say button tap button, and that's equal to the type of button, and find view by ID, RID sample_BTN. Now, similar to how it didn't like text view, the same thing will apply to button. We have to import the widget for a button so that it recognizes all of the other resources that go along with working with a button. And let's see, ID sample_BTN cannot be resolved. Make sure my file is saved. Yep, that's all it was. It was not saved. And here again, tap button is a warning because we haven't used it yet. So let's put this text on a button. So we'll say tap BTN, set typeface, and we'll still use grunge. Alright, I'll save that, come back to my graphical layout. Still, it's not going to show us what the font looks like until we actually test it in an emulator or a live device. Emulator. And then here's our button with our custom font, and then our text with the custom font.